Racist cop jails black woman for fun, unaware she's the police captain's wife. The sun burned down hard on Atlanta's West End, casting long shadows across the pavement as the city pulsed with its usual weekday chaos. Heat shimmered off car hoods. Honks and murmurs filled the air. And amidst it all, Maya Johnson stepped out of the furniture store, holding a carefully wrapped box in both hands. She looked elegant without effort. Loose curls framed her soft face. Her dress was simple but tastefully chosen, in earth tones that flattered her deep brown skin. She moved with a quiet confidence, the kind that spoke of self-respect rather than arrogance. There was grace in her stride, poise in her stillness. She was the kind of woman people noticed, not because she demanded it, but because her presence asked nothing and needed nothing to be powerful. The gift in her hands was for her husband, a leather-bound antique compass she had spent days searching for. She knew how much he valued things that symbolized direction, purpose, legacy. He had always been her compass, and now she hoped to return the sentiment. She placed the package carefully on the passenger seat and began to drive home, humming a soft tune under her breath. The traffic light turned red. She stopped at the intersection. That was when she saw the patrol car pull in behind her. Blue and white, engine purring. A beat of silence before the red and blue lights blinked to life. Maya blinked, then signaled right and slowly pulled over. The officer approached with a heavy gait. Tall, white, clean-shaven with a jaw set like stone. His name tag read Caldwell. Officer Ryan Caldwell. He wore his badge like a weapon and his smirk like a dare. Maya rolled her window down and offered a calm smile. "Good afternoon, officer," she said politely. "Is something wrong?" Caldwell leaned in close as if inspecting a threat instead of a driver. "License, registration, and step out of the vehicle, ma'am." There was no explanation, no greeting. His tone was clipped, mechanical, and cold. "I'm sorry, could you tell me why I'm being pulled over?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. He stared at her for a second longer than necessary, then spoke. "Suspicious behavior," he said, flatly, vague like an accusation without a shape. "Suspicious," Maya repeated. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "I was just leaving a store. I haven't even committed a traffic violation." I said out of the car. His hand drifted toward his belt where his holster waited like a threat. For a moment time slowed. Maya's fingers trembled slightly on the steering wheel, but she didn't let fear control her breathing. She nodded once slowly and stepped out. Caldwell motioned her toward the sidewalk, then circled the car without a word. He opened the passenger door and rummaged through her things with gloved hands, careless, disrespectful. "Sir, I don't consent to a search," Maya said firmly. He didn't even look up. "You don't need to consent, ma'am. This is standard procedure." It wasn't standard, it wasn't legal, but he knew she knew, and still he did it. When he didn't find anything suspicious, Caldwell turned back to Maya and narrowed his eyes. "Turn around, hands behind your back." What Maya's breath caught in her throat. "I've done nothing wrong." "You're resisting arrest now," he said with a smirk. "You want to add obstruction." "I am not resisting." He grabbed her wrists and twisted them behind her back with unnecessary force. The metal of the handcuffs bit into her skin. People began to stop and stare. Pedestrians, passers-by, a woman filming with her phone, a man whispering, "What did she do?" And Maya stood there handcuffed under the burning sun, heart pounding but her eyes clear. She didn't scream, didn't beg, she simply looked at Caldwell. And in her silence there was more defiance than 1,000 words. He shoved her into the back seat of his cruiser like she was some criminal, some threat to the order of the city. The car door slammed. In the confined space of the back seat, Maya's hands ached. Her wrists were already beginning to bruise. The air was heavy and smelled of vinyl and dust. She tried to breathe. She remembered what her husband once told her. when she faced discrimination at work. "You don't have to fight fire with fire," he said, "just let them burn out on their own." At the precinct, no one looked her in the eye. Caldwell booked her under false claims of resisting arrest and suspicious behavior. Then he left her in the holding cell with nothing but concrete walls, a metal bench, and the sour stench of sweat and bleach. 14 hours passed. No phone call, no lawyer, no rights read to her. She asked again and again, but the answers were always the same: "You're not a priority, you'll have to wait." And still Maya didn't scream. She sat on the bench, her back straight, her mind busy. Her gaze wandered to the ceiling, cracked and yellowed with time. Her thoughts wandered further. How many women like me have sat in places like this? How many have no husband to come find them? How many have no voice loud enough to be heard outside these walls? And when the officer on night duty asked if she wanted food, Maya simply said, "I just want to go home." Her voice was quiet, not broken, just tired. And in that moment, a strange thing happened. The officer paused just a second. Something in her tone, something in her eyes made him blink, like he was seeing her for the first time. But he turned away. He wasn't the one in charge. Hours ticked by. The silence was deafening, but Maya endured. Not because she had to, because she chose to. Because dignity is a choice, even when it's being stripped from you one layer at a time. And while Officer Caldwell joked with a colleague outside the cell about how boring the shift had been until he decided to spice it up, he didn't know. He didn't know the woman he humiliated was the wife of the man who would soon walk through the doors and flip the world he thought he controlled upside down. He didn't know justice was already on its way. And it had her last name. The first rays of sunlight had not yet kissed the rooftops of Atlanta when Captain Elijah Brooks woke with a weight in his chest and a silence in his home that felt unnatural. The bed beside him was empty. He glanced at the time. 6:47 a.m. Maya always came home before dark. She always texted. She always called. This wasn't just a missed message. This was wrong. He sat up in bed, mind already racing. He checked his phone again. No calls. No messages. Not from Maya. Not from anyone. Something inside him stilled. A silence before a storm. Within minutes, Elijah was dressed in his full captain's uniform. Polished badge. Ironed collar. Calm expression masking the storm in his gut. At the precinct, morning light spilled through the tall windows of the main lobby. Officers sipped coffee, exchanged routine chatter. Then silence rolled in like thunderclouds when Elijah stepped through the front doors. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. He walked with the authority of a man who knew exactly who he was. Calm. Controlled, but his eyes scanned the room like a hawk circling prey. Sergeant Ramos, a veteran with 20 years under his belt, met him near the reception desk. "Morning, Captain, something wrong." "My wife is missing," Elijah said simply. His voice was level, but his jaw was tight. "My calls went unanswered. She didn't come home." "Have we received any incident reports involving a black woman matching her description since last night?" Ramos hesitated, then blinked as he pulled up the system logs on his tablet. There was an arrest logged by Officer Caldwell yesterday afternoon. Female in her 30s, brown sedan, booked for resisting and suspicious behavior. No ID on file. Where is she now? Holding cell C4, sir. Elijah didn't run. He walked down the cold hallway past the pale green walls that smelled of bleach and bureaucracy. Each step a drumbeat, each breath a countdown. Then he turned the corner, and there she was, behind cold steel bars, still in the same clothes, eyes swollen from exhaustion, sitting upright like a queen on a crumbling throne. For a brief moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. Maya stood slowly and looked at him. No words, just silence. The kind that speaks volumes. His chest tightened, but he held it in. "I'll take care of this," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered. 15 minutes later, the entire administrative board was summoned into the review room. Elijah stood at the head of the table. He did not raise his voice. He did not pound his fist. He simply spoke. "Yesterday afternoon, Officer Ryan Caldwell unlawfully detained and held my wife Maya Johnson for over 14 hours without proper cause, without legal representation, without reading her Miranda rights. He searched her property without a warrant and made derogatory statements while in uniform." Some faces paled. Others avoided his eyes. But no one interrupted. He tapped the console and played the footage from Caldwell's body cam. The room fell into a stunned silence. The images were clear. Maya standing calmly. Maya asking polite questions. Maya being cuffed with no resistance. And then came the audio. Caldwell laughing with a fellow officer. "You know, I was bored, man, just grabbed her to keep it interesting. These types never put up much of a fight anyway." And with that, the room changed. Rage. Embarrassment. Shame. Ramos looked away, fists clenched under the table. By the end of the recording, no one was speaking. Elijah let the silence settle like dust on a forgotten photograph. He looked around the room, slowly pausing at each face. If this had happened to any other citizen, if this woman had been anyone else, we wouldn't even be in this room right now. You'd have called it abuse of power, you'd have called it misconduct, you'd have demanded accountability. He paused. "And now that she is my wife, you will not protect him, you will hold him to the same standard you owe every citizen of this city." He left the room without waiting for a response. But he didn't need to. The storm had already been set into motion. That evening, the footage was leaked online by a young rookie officer who couldn't stomach the silence any longer. It went viral in hours. The world watched. The hashtag Justice for Maya trended across platforms. News anchors questioned the system. Talk show hosts condemned it. Celebrities reposted the footage. Protests erupted across the city. Outside the station, people gathered with signs chanting her name. "She's someone's wife. She's someone's daughter. She's someone who mattered." Caldwell remained silent as cameras swarmed his driveway. He closed the blinds, locked his door. But there was no locking out the consequence. His fellow officers stopped talking to him. His commander stripped him of his badge and service weapon. And still he said nothing. Still he refused to apologize. During a press interview, Caldwell finally spoke. "This has been blown out of proportion," he said. "I was just doing my job. People need to stop making everything about race." But the world wasn't listening to him anymore. They were listening to Maya, and she hadn't even spoken yet. In the days that followed, Maya remained quiet. She refused every interview offer, declined every request for television appearances. She was not interested in becoming a symbol. She was interested in restoring her dignity, and the dignity of others like her. And while Officer Caldwell's name became synonymous with disgrace, Maya Johnson became something more. She became a quiet storm, not by shouting, not by burning, but by surviving, by refusing to break, by standing still while the world finally turned to face itself in the mirror. The courtroom was filled to the brim. Reporters lined the back wall. Microphones buzzed. Cameras clicked like tiny machines of judgment. Spectators leaned forward in wooden benches, eyes trained on one man. Officer Ryan Caldwell sat at the defendant's table, shoulders stiff beneath his cheap navy suit. He no longer looked like the man who had smirked with power. His face was pale, jaw clenched, sweat collecting at his temples. Across from him, Maya sat with her lawyer, chin held high, face unreadable. She wore white, not as a symbol of innocence, but of clarity, of peace. When the judge entered, the room stood, but the air didn't move. The trial began. The prosecutor laid out every detail. The unlawful stop, the illegal search, the baseless arrest, the 14 hours in holding without due process. Then the footage, the smirk, the words. You know, I was bored, man. Just grabbed her to keep it interesting. The room recoiled in silence. Caldwell's defense attempted to reframe the incident. It was standard procedure. He had no idea who she was. It was a misunderstanding. But the truth was plain. He hadn't cared who she was. He only cared that she was black, that she was alone, that no one, he thought, would believe her, until they did. Then came the moment the room held its breath for. Maya took the stand. She wasn't a performer. She wasn't dramatic. She was human. She spoke softly, clearly, with weight in every word. I didn't speak that day because I knew he wanted a reaction. I didn't cry because I knew he would feed on it. I sat quietly in that cell because I've sat quietly all my life while men like him assumed they had the right to diminish me. She paused. Not because I'm Captain Brooks's wife, but because I am Maya Johnson, a woman, a citizen, a human being. I deserve dignity, not because of who I'm married to, but because I exist. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty. Abuse of power, false arrest, racial profiling, misconduct in uniform. He was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, stripped of his pension, dishonorably discharged, and placed on the national list of decertified officers. But the most powerful moment came after the verdict was read. As he was being escorted out, Caldwell turned back and for the first time his voice cracked. Why didn't you say who you were? Maya stood, walked past him, stopped. Then she looked him straight in the eye and said, because you shouldn't treat anyone the way you treated me. Even if they have no one behind them, you don't get to only respect power. You have to respect people. Then she walked on, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was justice. Weeks later, Maya gave one single interview. She sat on the steps of a community center on the south side of Atlanta, surrounded by young girls, women, neighbors, people who knew her not as a victim, but as a survivor. I'm not here to make noise, she said. I'm here to make change. She began leading citywide workshops on police rights, systemic bias, and community resilience. She turned her experience into fuel, not for vengeance, but for awareness. She started a foundation in her mother's name, the Dignity Project. Its mission was simple: teach people that their worth doesn't come from title, wealth, or connection, but from the fact that they exist. Cameras came and went, but Maya remained, rooted, quiet, powerful, and the city, it changed. Slowly, but it changed. One officer was held accountable, but one voice sparked a movement, and that was enough to begin. Because sometimes justice isn't a hammer. Sometimes it's a whisper that refuses to be silenced. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There are many more stories like Maya's that the world needs to hear. Click like, drop a comment, and follow us for the next video in this journey of truth, courage, and transformation. Because stories like these, they're not just entertainment. They're a mirror, and sometimes they're a spark. We'll see you in the next one.